I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Welcome back to Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. I am speaking with John Klar, the national correspondent at Liberty Nation. He penned a terrific article talking about the administration's inflation blame game. In part 1 of our interview, we discussed the White House's inflation messaging. In part 2, Mr. Klar and I talk about the facts. Enjoy. At the end of your article, you say that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell admitted that prices will never return to their pre-pandemic levels. Is this accurate from them, or are they just admitting that Bidenomics is a failure? Tell me about this.
So in asking that, are you asking, was I accurately reporting what they said? Because I think what I did was characterize, and there's a certain sleight of hand there because there are only so many rabbit holes we want to go down. If you look at their statements and you study it, they both allow for the possibility of prices dropping down again, which historically they just don't. Inflation tends to move in one direction in all forms of currency. But there are exceptions, which they have hinted at, and that would be deflation, which I happen to know that you have talked about and studied. So I wondered if, even in asking me that question, if that's where you're fishing. Yeah, prices won't come down unless something much, much worse happens, from which they will rescue us from that electronic currency that we're using, that currency that we're not talking about. So actually, we may, but we may have dodged a bullet. It would be nice to think if we could learn something from this, but all of this is a reminder of something that Friedman emphasized in his book, Money Mischief, which is the study, and as the very title suggests, the study of how money supply, fiat currencies in particular, when you're printing money, how it can be abused. And we see an example. If Joe Biden prints trillions of dollars or whatever, billions of dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act, puts an Orwellian name on it, which he later admits, as I point out in the article, had nothing to do with inflation. Yes. It was buying stuff from China to save the planet, which you know how much that's going to help the economy. Now, if you do that short term, you may actually look good. You may see a short-term stimulation of the economy. As Ron Paul has written about and others in the Austrian school, short term, you tend to see a boom in real estate prices and stock market prices, kind of like you've been seeing here. And then when it wears off, two things happen. You either need more to keep the economy going, a la Zimbabwe or other places, or people just now settle in with their new level of, half the value of their pensions, half the value of their Social Security payments. And you can't trace it to the actor who passed the Inflation Reduction Act, especially if it was named the Inflation Reduction Act. How could it be anything other than, what it's called, And so the temptation in an immoral society, in a deteriorating barbarian banana republic society, that can't even police its own borders, is that there's no accountability for monetary policy by the very top, the people who are spending trillions of our dollars, including sending us checks that we don't want, because we still owe that money back now, Andrew. So we have layers of mismanagement of our money supply, I think, actively happening before us. And so however much we seek or others seek to blame Russia or people not taking the shot or whatever else, it's still going to come home to roost. That's how math and gravity and economics work.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too, is that it's called the Cantillon effect, is that when you print the money, people closest to the money spigot benefits from all that inflation. So by the time the inflation is exhausted and travels through the economy, you're left paying the bill. So the average person go, a $1,400 stimulus check, but they're left paying that massive, $5 trillion bill. From your vantage point, has inflation been defeated, or are we still contending with this massive threat to our economic independence?
Well, from my vantage point, I hope it's a humble one. I have a background studying some of this stuff, but we're in some uncharted waters here. But my vantage point also includes my focus as a farmer and a person who writes a lot about agriculture on food prices. And I mentioned, core versus headline inflation. The distinction is based on energy and food prices. Why do you take them out when they're the most impactful on the lives of Americans? We have a lot of global conflicts and other things that could impact us, including, inflationary pressures to fuels or grains. Look at Ukraine. I mean, there are a lot of things happening. Energy prices coming down, aside from whatever influences are causing that, are going to give us some relief and allow us, particularly in the food area, because as long as fuels stay high, they are layered as input costs, particularly in food, and the things that really hit Americans. So from my vantage point, I'm skeptical that even a lot of the things we hear about inflation being down is part of a scam for 2024. Yeah. Because I've lost a lot of confidence in the media.
Now, you mentioned 2024, so heading into the November election, will inflation still play a big role for the presidential contest?
Yes. And I think voters need to be reminded. I mean, if the president of the United States is told that he can't spend hundreds of billions of dollars on loan forgiveness, he says he's going to do it anyway. If nothing else, aside from balance of powers, that raises the question about whether he can understand what a piggy bank is and why you can't smash mine. And of course, Clinton famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." I have marveled in recent years that the economy has not been the top of the list. Studies show, for instance, that if the economy is imperiled, the environment as an issue amongst voters drops pretty down very low, very quickly. And we're there now again. I don't think for the Democrats in particular that they can get away from holding the bag that they have filled with all kinds of disasters for us. And literally on the campaign trail, will they be calling for more expenditures to repay student loans, or for universal income, or for reparations, or for all of these great social justice ideas that all come home to roost in the economy in a very foul way, if you'll forgive that pun?
I would like to thank Mr. Klar for appearing on Swamponomics TV. He will now join the long list of terrific guests who have appeared on the program, including Stephen Moore, Ron Paul, Daniel J. Mitchell, and Jim Rogers. And be sure to check out my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.